Good day, all the listeners and viewers of the Metaphysical Mysteries Podcast, the most interesting part of your day. Today, we have a fantastic guest. I would just call him Oscar, but I'm going to let him give the full name correctly as I find it interesting. And he is a shaman, Peruvian American, has a world of interesting information on shamanism. And, it's such a vast area that we on the show have only done a little bit of shamanism, but he's the expert. So we've got him here for you, and he's going to be one of the speakers at the Expand Conference, June 7th and 8th. In Atlanta, Georgia. So if you get a chance, Google that up, and we'll have all that detail and data and everything on Oscar and the rest of the Expand Conference on the metaphysicalmysteries.com website, as well as links in here. So, Oscar, welcome.
Thank you, my good brothers. It's an honor to be here on Metaphysical Mysteries series. My full name, as you requested, is Oscar Manuel Miro Quesada Solevo el Tercero, but you can just call me Oscar. It'll be much easier. I'm a Peruvian American, and I have lived in both cultures simultaneously since my birth to the current moment in time. And I bring to the modern, acculturated Western psyche the teachings of soul infused reality, which is what shamanism is about. It's all about animacy. It's all about tuning in with an animate, conscious, living, pulsing earth and receiving guidance from that soul that contains all of the knowledge that we need to be able to walk in beauty and follow the original instructions given to us by our cosmic mother. So, in a nutshell, shamanism is the first spiritual path that we walked on this planet, as well as the first uh, healing tradition that emerged out of the human impulse to care for something equal or more than oneself. So, it's very selfless in its approach to healing. It requires stepping out of the way, becoming a hollow bone, and allowing Great Spirit to use you as an instrument of restoring wholeness where separation has been present and fear into loving presence on life. In a
Fantastic.
nutshell.
So, for our average listener who may know nothing about shamanism, I mean, shamanism in one form or another is all around the world and has been through the indigenous cultures. What makes what you do different than the others, or is it just regionalized for Peru and the Andes Mountains, kind of that thing? What's the story with that?
Wonderful question. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I'm not a shaman. The only shamans I know are deceased. I am a
Okay.
practitioner of what's known as kamasqa curanderismo, which is North Coastal Peruvian folk healing that involves a ceremonial altar ground in which various powers and forces within the natural world, as well as the unseen dimensions, are invoked, evoked, and decreed to be of service. So it's energy medicine, basically, aligned with a lineage that is millennial, that has an unbroken heritage since before written history. So the shamanic practice that I do requires that we never become an expert. So that's another thing. I am not an expert. I'm always a learner. We have this saying in Peru that keep it green. It's like similar to in recovery, always be a student. So it's very important that when you enter into the shamanic path, that you realize that you're not going to become this enlightened emissary, this hierophant, this great master, that if you're seeking to do that, you better, transit to another dimension because mastery is about learning to live the simple things in life, such as how to wake up every morning and understand that you are the result of being grateful for the sacred gift that is life. And if you wake up and go to sleep with a sense of gratitude, then you have initiated a shamanic path. It is really that simple and that basic, which is the foundation before you go into all of the very artful ritual practices and the more complex services that we could do through ritual feedings known as mihushankus, creating offerings to the living earth, being able to call upon the powers of nature, the encantos, the raw powers of nature, and use them in a manner that's going to harmonize natural catastrophes rather than amplify them. Then there's the own personal transformative process that one engages in through vision quests and through rites of passage that are fundamental, in which it requires great abstinence and hardship and denial of oneself, and everything in an effort to annihilate the stinking, thinking, drunken monkey mind, the ego, and purify oneself and empty oneself so one can become a conduit. In that sense, a source of healing light and of loving grace upon planet. In a nutshell, that's really what the shamanic path is about. After that, there's a lot of bling and it's a lot of smoke and a lot of mirrors, and there's a lot of beautiful activities and games that are used within the ritual practices that involve a ceremonial altar space that have sacred items from various different traditions, but primarily from pre-Columbian cultures of Peru and the Andes, that contain what's known as a cuenta, a story, a narrative. They have a medicine life, and they talk to the practitioner, and they guide the practitioner. And the practitioner is called to use them as an arte, which is a power object, and place it in the hand or on top of a certain place of the body that is energetically receptive to the harmonization that those shamanic artifacts provide. And that's where the beauty and that's where the dance and the aesthetic grace of this great work shows itself the best, through ceremonial practices involving shamanic power objects and calling on one's tutelary animal allies to assist one in healing particular issues, either of harm or issues of God. We understand illness to be either something that is here as a teacher or something that is here as a bothersome intrusion that is temporary that we need to send on its way. I trust that this clarifies some things.
Yeah, it brings up 1,000 questions, of course, but I'm going to let Tom start off with the first question. So go ahead, Tommy.
It's probably a two-pronged question, actually. In our earlier conversation, you mentioned that you had a background in psychological training. And I'm just curious, which came first, the shamanism path or, the psychology training? And how did you get on the shamanism path? Did you seek it out or did it seek you out? And I guess the second part of that would be, how do you blend those two with seemingly different pathways?
Wow. Okay. How long do we have? Anybody who understands that there's a possibility that we do benefit from the immortality of soul, in other words, that the soul survives bodily transition, that this is just not it, that we are a universal presence within the great cosmic mother's dreaming, and as such, as souls, as consciousness, we are immortal. My path began lifetimes ago. Now, to be specific, in this particular embodiment and incarnational period, my father worked for the National Institutes of Public Health, So he was stationed in very remote rural areas, helping the indigenous communities have better health care. And aside from integrating the non-allopathic tools that they had, the plant remedies, the ritual practices, etc., into the more modern Western model. So from age 1.5 to age 4, I was living in the bush practically, in the northern highlands, in the southeastern Amazon area, and was surrounded by the shamanic consciousness of our indigenous peoples. So all of that was very formative, and it imprinted in me a passion, a love of the native Peruvian culture. So their ethos, their cultural identity was inseparable from my own. So I always felt a little disconnected and out of sorts when I returned to Lima, the capital city, and began my more Western acculturated path. Yet I wanted to study medicine. So I start out in pre-med, well, in biological sciences. And during my studies at one time, I was doing a work study at the library, and this book flew off the shelf because I was stacking books, and it hit me in the head and it landed on the ground and it opened up to a passage. I picked up the book and started to read it, and it was Carl Jung's Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, his autobiography. And I started to read it and I couldn't put it down. And I switched my major from life sciences to psychology at the moment. And that's how I got into psychology. And I found that because of my own apprenticeship that began at age almost 18 years old in 1969 and lasted until 1982 with a renowned shamanic master, Don Celso Rojas Palomino of Salas, Chiclayo in northern Peru. He took me on as an apprentice. So throughout that period of time, from 69 to 82, with any summer vacation I had, any time off, I'd go to Peru and go to his place and learn the arts of what's known as Huachuma Mesada curanderismo. It's folk healing that involves an altar ground and serves the local communities. And little by little, I realized that because I was also studying at that time, my undergraduates, I realized that the traditions of the shamanic peoples of Peru had a great deal to teach the Western psychological discipline, and that it would be a shame if we could not bridge both of them. So I dedicated my life to doing that and I became a fellow with the Organization of American States in ethnopsychology. And as a result, was able to develop a public health system, mainstream the folk healing traditions into the healthcare delivery system in Peru over a period of 2 years. So to answer your question, they were simultaneous. One did not come after the other. It was like a very seamless emergence, a process of co-arising, if to use the Buddhist term, of both my love of the human psyche as soul, not just as mind, and my passion for the ritual artistry of the Peruvian shamanic ways of healing. And that's how I came to where I am now and developed what's known as the Pachakuti Mesa tradition of cross-cultural shamanism for personal and planetary renewal.
That sounds like a big topic.
It's not bad.
Not bad. One of your other speakers, Suzanne Giesman, who's been on the show, she talked about a book falling off or sliding out, and talked about the other side, making sure that you got exposed to what you needed to get exposed to. So when that book of Carl Jung flew off the shelf, obviously that doesn't just randomly happen. So your team on the other side, I assume you've had opportunities to discuss that that's where they wanted to break through. So they physically moved the book so you could be into that, I assume.
Well, I would agree. And at the same time, I need to remain cautious in ascribing any particular source, be it an archangel, some other luminous being or shining one from the various unseen hierarchies that populate the living cosmos or the like, depending on one's cultural preference. Of course, we can give form to various really luminous beings that are behind the scene orchestrating all these very synchronistic or coincidental events in one's life that are catalysts and lead to one's waking up progressively over time and realizing that nothing is really outside of oneself. It's all within, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Well,
so therefore, that would be my answer. At the same time, though, that's one of many, many other remarkable, incredulous events that have taken place that if I tried to give them some objectified empirical explanation, I would be laughed out of any academic environment I was part of.
yeah, in doing the show, Tom and I get to hear from so many varied sources, but there is always this common link, that we are everything within ourselves. We're a projection, if you will, of our higher self soul. What I find is that the change is based on language or labels. If I'm talking with Buddhist folks, it's going to be that way. Christian folks this way, shamanistic folks this way, but they're all pretty much, if they get to a certain level, they seem to be talking about the very same phenomenons, very same concepts, and it's just done in a different focal way, based on all the different, if you want to call it religions or belief systems around the world, which I personally find fascinating. I don't give one any more credence than the other because it's working for that group of people. Once they get beyond the boxed programs of a religion, they elevate themselves by their own means to get to that level of higher consciousness, higher levels of thinking, and so forth. And so I think you've described that pretty well from your perspective that you're involved with, which is fascinating to me. And I really think that's pretty interesting. When you say you do these rituals, um, where physically do these rituals typically take place if you're going to do one?
Well, I have a medicine lodge in my home, what's called an altar mayor, and I have a traveling mesa, or mesa is Spanish for table, but it's really an altar that consists of various pieces that I've inherited over time from other healers that have passed on, that have given them to me as part of their dowry, and also things that I have collected on my pilgrimages, on my own vision quests that Mother Nature has offered me, which are known as estrellas, gifts from the natural world. And they all contain a story, and together they are basically a an akashic field,
Mm-hmm.
a patterning of every thought, word, and action, both human and non-human, that creation's dreaming entertains itself well with, if you'd like me to be precise. And all of that is based on 5 simple principles. Number 1, consciousness begets matter. By begets, we mean structures, gives form. Consciousness begets matter. Language, like you were saying, the words that we begets reality, right? Ritual begets relationship. Nature begets purpose, and love begets life. So everything begins with consciousness, which harbors the greatest gift we have as two-legged humans, which is imagination. So when we enter into these rituals, we do it understanding that imagination is not just fantasy. It is a decree, a conscious, mindful decree of a particular assistance from powers and forces that permeate the living universe that are being entrusted into one's hands as a shamanic practitioner, and that they are only to be used for good, that they are only to be used to elevate human awareness of their own divinity, as well as to remedy any physical or emotional or psychological ills that somebody who comes to you for healing requires. And it needs to be done from a place of selflessness and true loving, caring presence with the other. Once you do that, magic happens.
I'm with you. I do a thing called tactical imaging and using our imaginary forces, which are real. And I tell people are real. Edgar Cayce, the great sleeping prophet, said, clearly our imagination, our imaginative forces are real, and we can use those to our advantage and for the good, And so I concur. I mean, what you're laying down, I'm picking up. Let's put it that way. As some of the people would say, it's awesome. So, Tommy, you got a follow-up question, I know.
Yeah, if one of our listeners was to come and seek out your services, what might be some of the common things they come for? And then what does that look like, a session or sessions with them, to direct towards the outcome they're seeking?
Most people that come for shamanic assistance are experiencing an estrangement from the sacred dimensions of life. They've lost their connection to spirit. And not by their own making, but often through traumatic events in their lives, especially in formative years in their childhood. So they come already wounded and victimized. And therefore, the most important thing that I could do is to help restore their sense of divinity, their experience of the magic and mystery that is life, their experience of being grateful even for the illness, the disease, or the very traumatic circumstances that have led them to come to see me for these services. They are teachers. I help them enter into a relationship with the actual dis-ease as an instructor, as through objective other dialogue, by giving that experience some form, sculpt it, draw it, paint it, write it, give it some form, and enter into a dialogue with it. Allow it to help you remember its reason in your life and how, even though it may be very painful physically and emotionally, that pain is due to the resistance that you have because you are not opening up to the unknown, to the great cloud of unknowing, to mystery. And that the task is not to fix anything, yet to enter into a compassionate, loving relationship with whatever is happening in your life and let go of any attachment to outcome. That is the most important thing. So it's like a river that flows back to the ocean, carrying with it all of the debris from the mountainsides as nourishment, as mihushanku, as spiritual food for the greater body of water from which we all emerged.
Absolutely. Tommy, that should sound real familiar. We had a conversation earlier today before the show, and it was almost, I feel like I'm being repeated. So that is awesome. We are on the same wavelength. No question about it. I'm loving what you're doing. It sounds awesome. Let me throw some things out because a lot of people talk about South American I'll call it shamanism for lack of a better term. And people go to various countries, Peru being one, using ayahuasca or something like that. I know there's the San Pedro cactus that people use, and it's a psychedelic, so to speak, to help you go on, well, journeys. Um, so a psychoactive plant, so to speak, I consider those teachers, really, if people use them. But I don't know. I want to get your take on that and how that relates to somebody growing or expanding or understanding what you're talking about, or not, as the case may be.
Well, plant sacraments are an integral part of the shamanic tradition across the world, with the exception of a handful of others that do not partake of that communion with the spirit in the plant, right? It's about befriending the consciousness in the plant. It's not about the alkaloid that intoxicates you. So this is a topic for a whole other interview, probably. Yet I also wanted to expand a little bit on what Tommy asked me about particular ritual or techniques like extraction, and
Yes.
energy healings and stuff. But we could touch on that in a second. So yes, plant spirit sacrament usage, it needs to be approached very cautiously because they are keys to opening or separating the veil between seen and unseen dimensions. And a person who's not properly introduced to them through through fasting and austerities and cleansings and meditation and emptying before entering into that ritual experience could become very destabilized psychologically. And if they have any previous experiences with psychic depersonalization or self-referential thinking, that could even be intensified and they could have a full psychotic episode. So you need to be very, very cautious. So I don't condone its use just in general, except under the guidance of a very experienced maestro or maestra teacher of this, as well as within the environment or a supportive community of people who have done many, many moons of learning from that plant themselves. Yet they're very valuable. They're extraordinary catalysts, and they are extremely effective with PTSD and various other, psycho-emotional conditions that are characteristic with our modern world and the stress that we're under. It reframes one's entire relationship to the self, capital S. And so it can be very valuable and very life transformative under the right circumstances and the right setting and set, So that would be my answer to that. As you can see, this is an ayahuasca patterned shipibo shirt I'm wearing. So I have communed with these plants myself, and I have apprenticed with the Wachuma tradition, which is the use of San Pedro and mescaline-based cactus, which is really integral to the northern coastal tradition that I apprenticed with my mentor. And so I've communed abundantly with the wisdom of that plant and still do in occasion, but less so. Any plant has a healing geni, and what we call a daemon in the Greek. It's an animated wisdom that is waiting to be called forth. So it's really important if you do engage in these practices that whoever you go to seek service from has the right songs, the right prayers, the right invocations, the right use of ceremonial language that knows how to tease out the highest virtues of those plants and bring them into the field that you are offering them to harmonize their fragmentation. That would be my answer, brother.
Fantastic. Well, I could go into, like you said, it could be a whole nother interview because it's absolutely fascinating. But let's go back to the energy healing stuff. You wanted to comment on, follow up on Tommy's question.
Certainly. For instance, in terms of core practices in the shamanic path that I follow, we have extraction, we have delivery, and we have annihilation. And let me expand on this. Sometimes when there's an intrusive entity, quotes unquote, something that one does not identify as willfully having called into one's body, that has just come from some sort of strong emotion that has opened up your field, and there's been a little tear in the bioetheric sheath that covers us. Some lower astral frequencies can come into the body and take up residence and somaticize themselves in that part of the body. And shamanic extraction techniques, which is a sucking and actually drawing out with your breath that energetic miasm and offering it to the sacred winds for its transmutation, is a classic technique. It also requires preparation, and it requires inducing the person. I know both of you are practitioners of the hypnotic or arts, and in doing a light hypnotic induction so that the person remains very receptive, open, and willing to allow this extraction to be removed. Because many times there's a secondary gain. People like to be ill. They like to feel like victims because it brings meaning to their life. And in a sense, removing that may not be the best thing for them. They may enter into an even deeper illness if that plug is pulled out, if you get my drift. So you have to be very conscious, very intuitive, very sensitive to the needs of the other person before you do these extractions. So you could do that through your own suction, aspersion, or you could do it using a medicine piece, which is known as a kuya, placing it on the particular area of the body that has the most concentration of pain or energetic blockage. And through prayer and through energetic manipulation, we use sound, sacred mantric types of sounds. We use particular breathing techniques, and we use energetic delivery through the palms of our hands, also through the index fingers. And with these means, we can not only remove, but we can modify the circuitry, the bioetheric meridian system that has been blockaged. It's much like Reiki, much like Qigong in that sense. It's all the same. And that's the way that we do that. We do extract, and we do a surgical intervention through raising our own vibratory frequency through the use of sound, especially certain vowels, as well as focused, imaginative discipline. Seeing the outcome, holding strong that vision and that image as if it were really already happening in front of you. Yet that said, then turning over the result to a power greater than oneself. If God be willing,
Yeah. Interesting as you were going through that stuff I do every day. So I'm totally with you on that. And I also say it's similar to, well, we put a different term on it, exorcism. So in other words, you're taking something out, using energy to move something out. And we define it differently. If you think of the classic Catholic exorcism, that's not exactly the same thing, but it is in effect energetic movement, lower entities, astral, all this kind of thing. So I find it fascinating. I absolutely love that idea. Now, when you're doing these, and maybe new people who are going to be attached to you in the sense of learning from you, students, if you will, is in you're developing your intuitive nature or even psychic nature. Would you say that's part of it or irrelevant?
No, that's fundamental to have vista, which is shamanic vision or inner psychic sight. It develops over time, and it's very helpful for diagnostic and prognostic purposes, right? No, that emerges in its own way as you practice. And then the intuition is also foundational to this. There's times also that there are physical modalities, putting a person on your back and shaking them, getting them ready for the extract, shaking them, having them immerse themselves in frigid water, even sometimes softly, not painfully, whacking them with a staff or a branch of a particular medicine tree in parts of the body to also manipulate the stuck energy, if to put it mildly. So there's all these other things. Sometimes quarantine, sometimes they need to go out and isolate themselves in a natural environment and spend 2 or 3 days just with water and chewing coca leaves. That's it. All these are purification tools as well as energy enhancing modalities. So there's a plethora, there's a wide variety of tools that we use depending on each person. Yet, like you say, a person comes to you, you've already aligned yourself with the purpose of seeing into them, and you use your vista. And your vista can manifest both, it's always with images, it's never words. You see particular darkness or spots on a person's body, and therefore you get in a sense. And then there's times even, and this may seem horrendous to our Western acculturated listeners, but in Peru we use guinea pigs to extract that illness. Then you open up the guinea pig and you examine its entrails and you notice the little markings there, and you can divine what the physical ailment is. It's like taking an X-ray that is three-dimensional. Unfortunately, the poor guinea pig is sacrificed. Yet there's various tools that help us not only enhance our vista, our psychic sight and ability to see into the source of an illness, yet complete that by giving you a second objective read on that problem. Are you getting my drift?
I totally get you. I absolutely follow you.
Excellent.
Tom, I know you got a question. So
I know earlier you mentioned that before people do this, they should make sure the person is skilled and accomplished in what they're doing. How do you vet someone out if you're new to this and you're seeking out this modality as a potential option? How do you find the right people?
Well, isn't that the $100 million question? On a personal level, it's very difficult nowadays unless you're face to face with somebody in the flesh. I mean, if you have a Zoom call like this, basically the question to ask any shamanic practitioner that you're seeking help from is, are you dead? And see what they say.
Well, that's one way to end the call quickly.
Or really choose the person. because depending on what they say will make a huge difference. Before it used to be, are you a servant of the light? And see what they say.
Okay.
Yet, how long have you been dead? What's your death like? What have you learned from being dead? These are the questions. If you're in person, all you need to do is look into their eyes and give them a hug.
Hmm.
If you feel that they let you in, that they really lovingly receive you, then you're safe. Then you can trust them. It's very difficult to feign true embrace on an energetic level.
Absolutely. You just feel certain things. You just know them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, both Tommy and I get to do a lot of energy work in our field, and whether it's in a clinical setting or it's in a more personal setting, and which is fascinating. Um, we're going to start to wrap this thing up a little bit, but let's talk just briefly um, about this Expand conference and what you're going to be speaking. So if people want to sign up for this June 7th, 8th in Atlanta, when they come to listen to you, what are you going to talk about?
Well, I'm involved in two on a Saturday and Sunday. Saturday, our panel. It's a panel with other leading experts in their metaphysical fields, and I'm part of the morning panel. And my presentation is called "Shamanism as a Guiding Light Through Time," in which I'm going to present an overview of the evolution of shamanism and its trajectory throughout various world cultures and its relevance to these times we're living in right now, focusing on the importance of developing a sensitivity to the animacy, to the soul animated reality of Mama Pacha, of Mother Nature, and how you can incorporate that very simply into your life. And I'll be leading a small little practice to help people do that. And then on Sunday, I'm doing a 3-hour, apprenticeship or workshop that is awakening your shamanic soul, in which I'd go more in depth and teach what's known as the Pachamama renewal process and the shamanic earth walk, and I'll be having an altar ground set up so people will learn how to tune in to the powers and forces that are coming from these shamanic objects that are ancestral, pre-Columbian, some of them 1,200 BC in age, from the Chavin de Huántar culture, which is the maiden ground from which my tradition has emerged. And it's just magical and creative and artistic and participatory, and it's intended to foster the co-creation of heartfelt sacred community, of an ayu, of a field that can be, even on your own, taken with you into the world. So that's what I'll be doing on those 2 days, June 6th or 7th and 8th in Atlanta, Georgia.
It sounds like people are going to get their money's worth for this. It's not a super expensive conference either for those listening out there. Check it out, because I think you're going to enjoy what Oscar's got to say. I would be signed up for your class, just saying. I would enjoy that very much so. And now books, you've got books related to this thing too.
I do. I have initially. Everybody for years were asking me to write a book, and I just was hesitant because this is an orally transmitted lineage. And so my mentor, who I still am in touch with on the other side of the veil, wait, he would tell me, wait. And then finally, the world's leading expert in female folk healers. She's a cultural anthropologist at the University of Utah State University, Bonnie Glass Coffin, approached me. She came to one of our international gatherings that we held through the Heart of the Healer Mystery School. And she approached me and said, "I would love to write a book about you." And I said, "Well, about transformation. And I said, well, are you first willing to be transformed? And she said, yes. So I invited her here to my medicine lodge. We engaged in plant sacrament communion. And after a few days, it was evident that Don Celso, my mentor, said, yeah, this is the person to help you. So we co-authored this book called Lessons in Courage, Peruvian Shamanic Wisdom for the Modern World. After that, I did another audiobook through Sounds True, Healing Light, and I've written various smaller little tomes. And then lately through Sacred Stories, Shamanism, which is the one that is going to be featured at the conference, which is the latest book that I'm very proud of, because it has 25 stories of individuals that have been transformed and healed in it. Not only my own teachings, but these personal stories of 25 individuals, remarkable stories that are part of that compilation as well. And I'm in the process of writing my opus magnum. Opus magnum. It's I don't know what it's going to be called yet. All I know is that it's been fun sitting down and letting an integrated vision of my service path on planet to be expressed. Thank you for asking. And people who would like to know more and have a wealth of information that they can get for free is www.theheartofthehealer.org. Just go to the website, www.theheartofthehealer.org. There are sanctioned teachers that offer apprenticeships throughout the United States, Europe, and South America that you could find there as well if you're interested in a more intimate introduction to the work that I'm doing.
Fantastic. I noticed that spelled out Thoth. Fascinating. The ancient Egyptian, God man, if you will, a great teacher. Imagine that. Made his way
one
right
of those here. He's one of those that I do have a fondness for his crystallized etheric form that I identify as my guide. That's what I named the organization.
Yeah, for folks that don't know what the hell we're talking about, if you look up Thoth, you'll see him with the bird head, the big beak and everything, which that's a whole story in and of itself, why that actually occurs. That's not really what he looks like, but that's what it's portrayed as. So it's taking things out of the darkness and into the light.
The scribe.
Yes, he's the scribe, absolutely. And we could go into a whole nother topic just on Thoth. So anyway, that being said, Tommy, you got a final question or comments?
I just want to say thank you for joining us today. It's been enlightening. I'm sure our listeners have gotten a lot out of this. I know I have, and really appreciate you taking the time to share that experience that you bring to the table in a way that we can understand it.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Terry. It's an honor. Call on me as needed. We're here to be of service.
We will certainly do it.
Much love to you and to everybody that you touch.
Fantastic. Well, for all of us here at the Metaphysical Mysteries Podcast, we want to thank Oscar for being here, and we thank you all for attending and listening. And hopefully this is somewhat enlightening for you and it allows you to move on with all these resources in your own journey. So we will talk to you soon, and we'll be back with another exciting guest in the future. Have a great day.